Welcome to another episode of The Corner Booth, the official podcast of restaurantowner.com. Today, the restaurant industry is changing faster than ever. Learn from successful independent restaurant operators and other industry leaders as they share best practices that will help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Corner Booth. I'm Chris Tripoli with restaurantowner.com, coming to you today from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we've got a very interesting story to share. I had the pleasure of meeting Dan Sidner when we were at the recent NRA show not too long ago in Chicago. Great show. For those of you who missed it, make sure you don't miss the next one. The NRA did a great job with programs and presentations. But one of my joys was the new people you meet. So Dan has got a story to share about how he and his partner, Black Shoe Hospitality, not one, but three concepts. He is the co-owner and proprietor. So Dan Sidner, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Corner Booth.
It's my pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, we've got three exciting concepts to talk about. We've got a really good hospitality market in Milwaukee for you to update us on. But before we get to that, maybe you could share with our listeners just a little bit about you, how you first got into this crazy business. What were your, early influences that got you going?
So I grew up in Kearney, Nebraska, a rural part of the state. Most of Nebraska is rural. It's easy to accomplish that. And I knew that I wanted to see more of the world than Nebraska, and I knew I wanted to be in business, but I didn't really know any more than that. And I worked at a country club, and then I worked at a steakhouse, Grandpa's Steakhouse, and I enjoyed hospitality, but I didn't necessarily know enough to think of it as a career. I was lucky to be recruited to play football at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, home of the restaurant and hotel management program, hospitality program. And I got in, and I got there, and I just immediately fell in love with the industry and knew, truly happenstance. I did not go out and seek it, but it found me. And I kind of think of it as two sides of the education. The information I was getting at Cornell and great professors, I think that's really the difference. The professors and staff there are exceptional. But I also worked at a restaurant called L'Auberge de Cochon Rouge, Country Inn of the Red Pig, which sounds great when said in French, not quite so much in English. But the better part of the story is that it was called that because Etienne, the owner, was a heavy-set Frenchman, and he got red-faced when he drank, and he drank almost every single day. So Country Inn of the Red Pig was a pretty good name. And I learned a lot working there, especially about food and wine. I was really introduced to wine and spirits there. But I worked there all the way through college and, of course, did some other internships and various things. When I got out of college, I graduated, and I went to work in hotels. But even by then, I had realized I kind of did so because it was the opportunity in front of me. I saw right away that I really preferred independent restaurants over hotel food and beverage. I did it for a couple of years. I'm glad I did. I learned some good things. Worked for some folks down in Texas, the Harvey Hotel Company, and learned some good things working for them. But knew my heart was in restaurants and knew that I needed culinary experience. So when I left Texas, I moved out to Colorado, and I cooked for a couple of years, working in some very good restaurants and a hotel. Then I did a 12-week program at the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park, kind of a rotational program, and then left there and began a series of stages, some in the US, some in France, one in Switzerland, one in Germany. I was on the road for not quite 2 years. Then I returned to the U.S. and worked for a while as a chef, but really figured out that while I needed that culinary experience, I was more drawn to the front of house. At the time, I was very interested in the beverage end of the industry too. And I went to work for a company out of the Carolinas we were creating concepts and opening them and then selling them. That was a great experience, kind of understanding the process of opening restaurants. Ultimately got pulled back out to Colorado, where I was a general manager of a restaurant, and then I became managing partner in a restaurant called Zino, which is in Edwards, down valley from Vail, Colorado. And that restaurant still exists, still thrives. I'm no longer a part of it, but I was there for almost 6 years, and then decided the opportunity was presented to move to Wisconsin. My wife at the time, she was from Wisconsin, and we were expecting our first child. Felt like Wisconsin was a good place to live and raise a family. And I saw, having come from a hyper competitive market of a ski resort, I saw a lot of opportunity here. We lived in Madison for a bit, but decided Milwaukee was the better fit. And I came here. I worked for a couple of different restaurant groups initially, but knew that I was going to be doing a concept of my own and bought the building and opened Maxie's Southern Comfort there in May of 2007. So we're a little over 18 years old there. That restaurant actually is the second generation of a concept that my dear friend opened in Ithaca, New York, called Maxie's Supper Club. That restaurant is still doing well, is still there and thriving. And his name is Chick Evans. Chick and I worked together on the creation of Maxie's. Initially had the similar feel to it, but it was not. And it's certain the restaurant in Ithaca really had great access to seafood, so it was more of a seafood New Orleans style fish house. Here in Milwaukee, I didn't think that leading with seafood was going to be a success, so we went more of a broad-based Southern cooking concept, and have enjoyed a lot of success there.
That's great.
Yeah, while I was working in Milwaukee before I opened Maxie's, I met a gentleman named Joe Muench. Joe is tremendous chef and a solid human being who's from here. And he and I worked together on a couple of projects, enjoyed each other, and I initially offered him the job of executive chef at Maxie's, and he took it. We worked together for about a year, a little more, and then I offered him a percentage of Maxie's, and then everything that he and I have done ever since has been on an equal partnership.
Wow.
And
so this is a great start, and I'm hoping that listeners make a note of this. See, sometimes we get a lot of the stories, and I know you meet people like this too. Some of them, quite frankly, might be your customers. They get introduced to our business partly because they came from another industry.
Yes.
They couldn't wait, I guess, to take early retirement so they can get away from maybe a job that they didn't like. And then they open a little supper club, or they open up a tiny little Italian place where they can showcase grandma's recipes, or they, open up a burger bar like the one that they used to go to in college. So we hear those stories too. But this is a really good traditional lifer, worked in the industry, saw all sides of the industry, the culinary, the Europe staging, coming back, front of the house, wine knowledge, more working, managing until you own. So this is great ladder climbing, and with the gaining of restaurant experience from hands-on worker to bingo owner operator.
I like to joke that I am totally unqualified to do anything other than run a restaurant. So I better stick with it. Yeah. So Joe.
So you met Joe. This sounds like a wonderful partnership. You became partners. And obviously, you didn't just keep operating; you went on and did more creation.
I knew. So when I had been general manager and then managing partner of the restaurant in Colorado, Zino in particular, I was there a little over 5 years. I could do every job in that building. I knew how to. I could cook in every position on the line. I could do the pastry work in the morning. I was bartender, was front of house. It was a big restaurant. It was almost 200 seats with the patio. So it wasn't that it was just a little operation, but over the years I did everything. But I also did nothing but work in the restaurants. And I knew when I came to Wisconsin, from the beginning, my plan was to do more than one concept, partly because I love the creativity of it, but partly because I love running restaurants, but doing it in the same space, doing the same thing every day. I could see already that was not what I wanted for my life. So, and, I've seen a lot of operators, they open one and then 16 months later, they're open the next one and the next one. There was a 3-year gap between Maxie's and Blue's Egg, our second concept, and another 4-year gap. And I'll fill you in a little later, but we've gone on we opened some other restaurants, unfortunately one that did not work out, but I've never felt like I needed to rush off and do the next thing. But I think once you get to a point where you look around, you've got the right people in the right place, And,
Mhm.
you see it humming, you see it working. That's the time when I feel comfortable enough to say, all right, I'm going to think about the next thing. And I'm now, I started this when I was in my 30s. I'm now 57, and I look at things differently. I'm not dying to go do the next thing. I have a lovely family and I want to enjoy them and do some other things, but I still, now we've kind of changed our focus to be more about taking the restaurants that we have and how can we add value to them? How can we add service elements to them? In the case of one Blues Egg, we're doing more bakery. Maxie's is more catering, and so
Ah,
we have a liquor store. So
point. That you just commented on something that we're beginning to hear more of, that is sort of redefining success. That it's not always the numbers.
yeah,
It isn't always about having more.
yeah,
It's about having better. And so I think people could make note of that, how important that is to your story, that it wasn't about, although I did make a note of how you were driven by the fact that you do love the creation,
yeah,
but it sounds like it's very important for you to try to create, not by having to add units, more companies, but create by doing better. You've got concepts now. So yeah, so maybe you could share with that the other two
sure.
concepts and
So
those came about.
yeah, we opened Maxie's in 2007. I was the general manager. Joe is the executive chef. It was a dinner only restaurant, still is. And we would go out for breakfast meetings to, plan and prepare and try to improve the business. And we couldn't find a good breakfast place in Milwaukee. There was Perkins, and there's some local kind of greasy spoon diner type things, Waffle House type deals. Or there was the fancy Pfister Hotel, where you're going to pay $40 to eat a fruit plate. And we were like, it was just starting to happen. We were seeing concepts in Colorado. We were seeing concepts in California. Joe and I both travel a lot and try to check out what's going on in the major markets. And we're seeing these, and so this is 2009 that we were planning it. There were very few all focused brunch concepts, but we saw it, thought we could do it. A space close by, just 8 blocks from Maxie's, became available. And so we decided to jump in. And Blues Egg, it's just off Blue Mound Road, and there were a few other local references to Blue, but it was always going to be something egg, and egg stands for everyone's good graces. So if we take care of our guests, if we take care of the community, if we take care of each other, we will stay in everyone's good graces and preserve the egg. And so we opened that this week is our 15th anniversary. So 2010, July of 2010, we're now 15 years here. And this restaurant, Blues, is arguably our most successful, very busy. And I'll share a little bit about what we've considered with Blues. But so we did that in 2010, and then there was another location that was nearby. Our 3 restaurants are within a 1.5 mile radius of each other. So
No kidding.
yeah, and
Just conquer the neighborhood.
yes, that was kind of the idea. So we had a location, a building that was a pretty reasonable price to buy, and then we did same thing we did at Maxie's, bought the building and then put $1.5 gazillion into renovating it. Got a great deal, and then and that restaurant was driven by, it's called Story Hill BKC. Story Hill is the neighborhood that it's in Milwaukee. It's a really cute neighborhood. BKC stands for Bottle Kitchen Cocktail. And we went with that because I had always wanted, after years and years of turning people on to good wine, beer, and spirits, people would always ask the question, where can I get it? And I'd be like, well, you can try this wine shop or this liquor store. And in Wisconsin, if you declare on your license right away, you can open a retail shop along with the restaurant. And so we did. And finally was in a place where I could say, when someone would ask the question, where can I get it? It's right over there.
So you retail wine as well as drink on premise.
That is correct. Everything that we sell in the restaurant is available in the retail shop. We've got about 1,000 square feet dedicated to a retail shop. And now actually the laws have changed even further, such that we're some really high quality cocktails that we serve on a tap system. We use nitrogen instead of CO2. And we now are able to sell those bottled to-go cocktail bottles as well. So, and great selection of beer. We've got 18 beers on tap and a large selection of beers in the fridge. So it is that idea. And for Joe, Joe had come up as a chef in the area, and he had worked first at a Austrian French restaurant, and then he was at a steakhouse, and then he was at a country club, and he was always felt like he was doing somebody else's food. Even he loved the Southern food. He really dove in on that. Then it was, all things breakfast. He wanted a place where he could do whatever he felt was exciting or intriguing. So our concept in regard to the food there has always been local ingredients, world technique. So we at any given time will work with, in the wintertime, maybe as few as 12 or 13 local purveyors. Right now, I think probably 30 different purveyors of local farmers. And it's not just vegetables, it's beef and it's poultry and pork and, whatever we bring in from northern Lake Michigan. We're bringing in salmon and other fish, but we don't put any ocean fish on the menu there. It's all strictly local ingredients, local fish, local everything. And so for Joe, it was a chance. So, but any given time on the menu there, right now we've got Indian dishes, we've got French dishes, we've got Spanish, and it really is. And at lunch, we do an a la carte menu, brunch, an a la carte menu, and then at dinner, it's more of a sharing style menu. So although the thing that we got wrong, and luckily we're able to adapt, the concept was originally BKC, it was Bottle Kitchen Cup. We were going to do a coffee shop. We did do a coffee shop, that it was going to be a coffee shop initially and then morph into a dinner concept. For whatever reason, the coffee shop element of it never took off, but we were known almost immediately for these great cocktails. So, and we said, well, if we don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, how about we open at 11 during the week and 9 on the weekends, and instead of calling it BKC for cup, we'll call it BKC for cocktail. So that was a pivot that took place within about 4 or 5 months of opening, and has served us well. So
I bet. Sometimes happenstance just shows us. You had the right initial. It was C. You thought it might be coffee. No, it's going to be cocktail. And you're right. It sounds like it was a winning item. Sure does add to the per person check average, makes lunch, brunch, and dinner even more successful. So, rather than a separate day part that wouldn't really add much to the others,
right,
you've got something that makes the others more successful. Worked out well.
So just to continue a little bit with the history, and this is pretty telling about our, what we've learned. So as I mentioned, Blue's Egg has been very, very popular, and we were approached a number of times by people who wanted to put a Blue's Egg in another location. Finally, we were approached by some real estate developers who were doing a apartment building in Shorewood, Wisconsin, which is a northern suburb of Milwaukee, about 10 miles away. And great neighborhood, made a lot of sense. They made us a very generous offer, effectively building the restaurant for us to do a second Blue's Egg. And we did it. What we found, almost immediately, we realized that there was something that didn't feel right in doing a second one of the same concept. And there are a lot of restaurants out there that have done it, and I applaud it. For us, it just didn't feel right. It was just it wasn't the same fun of creating something entirely new, and to make it work in the next concept to a certain extent. To replicate something, you have to standardize it, and in doing so, you kind of have to dumb it down. And we just never felt great about that. As it happened, that location seemed like a great location, and unfortunately, it just really didn't. So we opened that in 2018. COVID hit in 2020. We closed it down, and we could have reopened and probably made it, but we decided, let's create something new. That part of town needed a good dinner restaurant. So we opened a concept called Buttermint Finer Dining and Cocktails. Buttermint for the old school buttermints you used to get at restaurants and supper clubs, and nostalgia menu, and great cocktails, big crystal tubs of booze and all that. And unfortunately, that neighborhood didn't support that restaurant either. We got tons of accolades and lots of nice press, and named best new restaurant by 2 different publications in town, and it just never took off. So we ultimately closed that one. So from 2018 through last July 2024, we were in that fourth location, and we were using it as a private event space right now. Honestly, we're still working on finding another permanent tenant to take it over. But what we found was a couple of things. One, just driving 10 miles, you kind of have to go downtown and up or through. There's a lot of construction going on. I really came to resent the drive, the time spent in the car. I forgot how much I loved having this small. I live a mile from Blue's Egg, which means I'm no further than 2 from any of them.
Yeah.
And some days I ride my bike to work. I just love the easy, close area that I have. So just the drive became a thing. And then, additional time, we were away from our other restaurants so much, and we're very hands-on. So it was too much work, very little return. So when we closed it, I think we were at a point where it was okay. We weren't losing money anymore, but we just weren't enjoying it. And we felt like the restaurants were suffering because of the time we were spending on the other side of town. We were putting all our energy into the least profitable business. So we closed, and that's when we really developed the mindset of let's maximize what we already have, because we're grateful to have 3 restaurants. They're well known, they're well liked. How do we make them more profitable? So,
you just hit a good point there. I just kind of want to quickly underline it. Sometimes we really overlook an ability to succeed by putting so much energy into something that isn't working. We come across that a lot. I bet some of our listeners are nodding their heads right now thinking, that's right. I'm going to stop putting 80% of my work energy into 20% of my revenue because, my food to liquor, beer and wine is like 80-20. So I sit here with my managers all day saying, how can we do more bar business? How can we do more liquor specials? How can we do something, instead, wait a minute, I'm putting all my time and energy into the smaller portion of my business instead of maybe I should spend time on saying, hey, this is what's working. How do we make what's working better? And you just hit that so hard, and when it was very obvious to know we've got 3 things that people like that really work well. How can we do those 3 better rather than spending all of our time and energy on a 4th one that doesn't?
Yeah. No, these are hard-learned lessons because, you give, the old adage about, you to open a restaurant, you lose a year of your life, and you can talk about the time spent losing it, and you can talk about the time it's taking off your life at the end of your life.
Let's try not to dwell on that.
Yeah, let's not dwell on that. But you reach a point where you're really, you have to look at this in terms of a life. When I talk to people about business plans, a lot of people approach me about that. And restaurant owner was hugely helpful to me when I was writing business plans. And I talk about the fact that it's not just you're not doing this just to impress the bank. You got to do this to figure out, is this something that I think will work, that will be worth my time to, produce enough income to make this worthwhile? And is this a lifestyle that I want to live? Is this a place I want to do? And, when I was in my 20s and even in my 30s, I could work 75, 80 hours a week and, still find time to play and whatever, and sleep was for another time. In my late 50s, I don't feel that way anymore. I need to be able to rest and restore, and I ride my bikes and I do my things to get out and enjoy nature. And it's important. So I feel like, and I remember Restaurant Owner had a couple of articles, and this is many years ago now, probably 15 or so, where it said very specifically, before you go and open that next restaurant, think about how you can make your own existing restaurant more profitable.
Sure.
Focus on that. You don't have any of the challenges of all the opening and all the things that you do. It's really remarkable. It's a smart thing. And of course I didn't follow that. I went off and did the things, but looking back at it now, I if I talk to younger people about it, it would be just It would absolutely be. Just look what's right in front of you first. Try to maximize that.
Well, just so that you know, that has been catching on. I can speak on behalf of restaurantowner.com when we come across that issue in the forum a lot. We have a tremendous amount of information, on the site, about assessing and improving current operations. And in past years, I've worked with many people, for example, that have been singing your same song. They said, we thought we were going to do one restaurant and then do 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead, we found that, we went from the lunch and dinner to lunch, dinner, and weekend brunch. And then after that, we started a catering outfit. And then with the catering, we took over the lease space next door and we made it our own little event banquet room. So, over a 5-year period, they've done some real good business building, but their expansion was within really one establishment.
Right.
In 2 or 3. It's happening.
Yep. So, we're still, and obviously COVID affected everything. Milwaukee was the city of Milwaukee took COVID restrictions very seriously. All of our restaurants are in the city of Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And then even just right next door in Wauwatosa or other locations, the rules weren't nearly as strict. So the restaurants inside the city of Milwaukee really suffered. We really suffered. And it wasn't just in 2020. It was 21 and 22. I mean, it really has taken us a long time to come back. And, first it was the actual closing of the restaurants and the challenges around that. Then it was trying to find staff again. I mean, we on March 16th of 20 was the day we shut down, and we held on for a few weeks with our staff trying to figure out how long this would work and whatnot. We ended up, at that time, we had almost 200 employees because we had the 4 restaurants and catering business. And we let 160 people go in one day. And as dark a day as that was, I had no idea what I had just done to my business. I really didn't understand how hard it was going to be to build that back up. And then, of course, initially, extremely hard. It's gotten better. It's actually markedly better now than it was even a year and a half ago. We have always tried to build full-time people. And we're almost at 50%. We're about 120 employees right now. We've got about 60 that are full-time people. I do tend to run more management than a lot of restaurants might, but we do that because we believe that we want a quality of life for our teams. And we challenge them to do and improve the restaurants daily. So, it's been a learning process. And now at this point, where I'm at, trying to figure out, I'd like to work for 10 more years.
Okay.
I don't know that I'm trying to think about how that my role can change, how we can be successful, how we can set up people. Because that's one of the things about an independent restaurant. A chain restaurant, if you're selling an Arby's, it's a known entity, right? This is what Arby's are, where they are, what menus are, those things. When you're trying to sell Blue's Egg, it's really built on Joe and myself, and the Kirsteins are partners there in Blue's Egg. It's on the people inside the building. And so that's harder to put a value on and, to assure a succession of some kind. So that's, as I think about the next 10 years, a big part of it is finding people who, perfect world, we sell them to people who are working for us right now, or maybe soon. That's really what we hope to do. But you got to get creative on that too, because often those people don't necessarily have the money. So you got to figure out how to help them secure financing and create a business or create a situation where they can succeed. So
when you get to that point, you might find that, as we have seen, that there can be a structure where there's a win-win. We have seen where some small independent operators, multiple units, say maybe 1 or 2 concepts, still small, 2, maybe 3 stores. They get to the point where they want to sell. There's good valuation, good profitability. But from the seller's point of view, they realize that, if I just do the sale and take what is a fair valuation now, over the years of retirement, due to taxes and whatnot, it may not be as well as if I could structure a sale, maybe with a group of key workers where I'm taking my sale money, but I'm taking it over a longer period of time. I'm keeping it more, and it could be a win-win. Helps
Yeah.
the buyer and helps, the income benefit to the seller. So there's your 10-year plan, obviously,
Yep.
is you maximizing these units, making what's good better. Love that. I just had to say that again because you've already mentioned that, how you studying your current businesses, improving and adding revenue where you can. And then it looks like it's going to be just sort of a long, over the years plan to develop people to maybe see how you can do a potential sale when, you're ready.
Yeah. No, it'll be an interesting process, and I've got some bucket list things I want to do personally. So figuring out that will take a little time away from work. So I got to figure out how to do that, and keep the delegation part of it is for an owner operator, it's everything. And I've been kind of, again, the idea that I wanted to do more than one restaurant. The second you make that decision, you have to invest in the people that work for you in a way that gives them a certain level of autonomy. You got to be clear about your goals and your expectations, but let them go do and do so knowing they're never going to run it exactly the way you would run it. And I think it took me a long time. It's like, no, you have to do it this particular way. And I finally have come to understand that as long as we're achieving the goals, I don't care so much anymore, or I'm at least more comfortable with backing off and letting people put their own imprint on something. So,
Yeah. There you go. Well, that kind of gets us into a hot topic of today. Some of the listeners are probably thinking about, in most markets, Milwaukee is a hot hospitality market. We continually hear how it's hard to find and then it's hard to keep people.
mhm.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things here that I'd love to have you elaborate on and how it works for you, because the concepts that seem to be winning now are the ones that do that, where they try to consider lifestyle, like you mentioned, even if it means a little bit of what some people might consider overmanagement. You find that you can excel in the operation that way, and also they can maintain a certain life balance. That's good. Then you mentioned, however, the engagement, having the staff feel more involved. And those are two things that I'd love to have you elaborate on a little bit on how does balance of lifestyle, how does staff engagement work, especially since you've got three stores, but they're three different ones. Is there some overlapping? Is there cross training? I mean, what can you do with staff that way?
So certainly at the line level, servers, bartenders, line cooks, all of those things, we try to incorporate as much cross training as possible. If you've been a server with me for 3 months and you're good and I like you and I hope, the plan is for you to stick around, you're going to be trained as a bartender.
Good.
And same thing. And, some people are resistant to that, but most people are generally willing and able because it adds to their resume and helps them do more. And they begin to see that by doing more, and in the kitchen, we actually have a structured plan of the more stations you can work, the more your pay rate goes up, because you walk in one day and John, the saute cook, couldn't make it today. You need Bob, the grill line, to be able to step in and do saute. So,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of structured plans are in place. With our managers, I wish I could quote statistics accurately to you here, but I'm going to use generalizations. 50% of the people that are managers in our company, chefs or front of house, started in line level positions with our company. So
Oh,
we have promoted from within as much as we possibly can. Another like 30% are people that we knew from other companies, or people that Joe or myself or Jason and Amy Kirstein had worked with previously, and we brought them in because we knew they were good. So we've had those relationships, and we have a lot of tenure amongst our management teams in particular. We have moved, in fact, we just recently moved one of our younger managers from Blues Egg over to Story Hill because there was an opportunity and she needed the grooming, and we saw it as a good opportunity. As much as I can do that, I try to do that. And if it's not a physical plant move, maybe like over at Maxie's, we're doing more and more catering business. I'm currently working with one of our managers there to have a greater focus on the catering end of the business so that he can see how the planning for it, how to properly bid business, that sort of thing. So we try to do it. And honestly, if, some people may look at it as like, well, I'm going to put all this time and training in and then they're going to leave. Well, maybe, but maybe not. If you don't train them and you don't give them new opportunities, they are going to leave. So I've always felt that it's worth my time to invest that way.
And, I've always thought to just the other side of the coin, when people would tell me it's so much time, so much money, so much an investment, and then they leave anyway.
Yeah.
So that almost makes me think of the other side of the coin. Well, what do you think is better then? Let's not train. Let's not invest in knowledge. But then what if they stay?
Right.
Now what do you got?
I've got good. I have the longest standing schmuck in the industry. Good for me. Yeah.
You're in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to do more with them in the way of training, but I think we found some ways to try and change and grow their roles. To be honest, we're trying to make our business more profitable by adding these services. In the case of Blues Egg, we've had a bakery here that has functioned fully for several years. Initially, each restaurant had their own pastry chef. We chose to consolidate. We took over some additional space, built out a bakery, and that has been our kind of commissary bakery for our 3 restaurants for some time. But we are now, just in the last year, in fact, we changed Blues Egg to Blues Egg and Bakery earlier this year to promote the bakery. We put in pastry cases at our retail, at the host stand. We're going to add even more later this summer and trying to grow it that way. So if you've got these bigger, like what I'm trying to get to is, if I were opening a new concept today, I would not open such a large restaurant. All 3 of our restaurants are all at least 100 seats. Story Hill's the smallest at about 100 seats. Blues is about 120, and Maxie's is almost 250. So if I were to do a restaurant today, I would do a smaller concept. I would do something, especially now with this taxes on tips and all of that. I would create a pool house where the front and back, everyone inside the building, except for management, would participate in tips. And I would do a small space that is open for lunch and dinner, or, longer period of time, and really cross-train, like everybody inside the building, as much as possible, have as many full-time people who are trained to do a little bit of everything. So again, I don't have any plans of doing that, but as I've talked to people about what they would do, some people are still talking about these big kind of showy restaurants. And I think if you talk to any of the guys who operate them, they'll all be like, yeah, I wish I was 50 seats smaller.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I really do. And I would agree to you on these 3 things that you threw out there that you see the future doing. I would definitely agree. The future is going to be in small, efficient spaces where you can create a concept without having to have 1 to 200 seats. Especially since we're leaning so much towards convenience. It's dine in, but it's also pickup, takeout, car side, third-party delivery.
Absolutely.
And then I love that the point that you made with the staff. The more of a team you can build out of your staff, so if that means counter service, everybody above minimum wage, everybody do tips, that's a good direction. And then I think that last one really does work too. The more cross-training, I just feel that means the more engaged the staff is. The more they can do, the more important they feel. Certainly, the more valuable they become. Perhaps the better they do, which means the longer they'll stay. So everybody wins.
I think every generation has a bad reputation for a while, right? That these kids today, they don't know how to work. I have felt more challenged by the current crop of young people, 15 to 30, than I have with previous generations. What I have finally come to understand, and my own daughter helped me get there, is that it is not that the young people in this country right now don't want to work, but they want to work for something that they believe in and that they have a feeling of inclusion in it. They're not willing to work and just be a number. And, there are times when that's frustrating. We're like, could you just please do your job, and we can, we'll talk more tomorrow about how you can grow. But I think if you're willing to take the approach right from the get-go, and I've actually changed, I do an orientation for all of our new employees. They do the kind of, where to park and where to put your coat and all that stuff with the restaurant managers. And then within the first month, I meet with them and and sometimes I'm talking to one person and sometimes I'm talking to 7 or 8, but I go over the history of the company, how we got where we are, and some of the background that I've shared with you today about Joe and I and Jason and Amy. And then we'll go over our mission statement and our core value statements that support that mission statement. And then finally, I give them kind of an inside baseball look at how we coach their managers to coach them. And I think that part, the new employee, and I can look around the room as I'm doing this, the ones that are buying in and are interested and kind of, have the spoon out and taking up the ideas, and the ones who are just like, why am I here? And, kind of, when do I get to leave and look at my phone again? If you explain to the employees right up front, hey, we are going to engage you more than you were engaged at your last job. We are going to give you direct feedback in the moment, on the floor. We're going to talk with you about what you're doing on the line. If you're not preparing something properly, we're going to stop. We're going to right then and there talk about it. And I think if you give people that awareness, if you just show up out of the blue and kind of blow them up, that doesn't work. You have to say to them, listen, at any given time, I may ask you some questions about your job. And I need you to be able to communicate that you understand what we're talking about, where we're coming from. So those things, I think, do seem to work. Again, it's more effort on the part of the manager.
Yeah, but there's no doubt it does. Yeah, I think you hit 2 points that I'd like to emphasize because I congratulate you for doing them well. The winners seem to be people who are recognizing that today's staff does react differently. You hit the nail on the head. People are not just looking for a job. They're looking for a place to be. Is this a place where I'm going to enjoy being here? Sure, I'm going to get a paycheck, but am I going to feel like I fit? Am I going to feel like I have some input? I'm engaged. I'm learning something. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to get a feeling of appreciation. All those things are very important to the generation that we're hiring, and you realize that. And the second thing that you just said that I think more and more people need to do, and that's the personality of the restaurant needs to become obvious, and that's you. You're the owner. So the idea that you do an orientation so that we can start with why. Sure, I got an orientation book. I know where to park the car. I know when payday is and hang the coat there. But wait a minute. Now I'm going to hear why we're doing this. Why we think the guest comes here. Why did the owners do this? What's the purpose? What are they trying to accomplish? Oh, I get it. Okay, so I'm going to feel a little bit more important now because I'm part of something. I'm not just a job. I'm part of what these guys are trying to do. I think that's real important. I'd love for you to continue it. I have worked with some folks that brought original family in to do this by video. It's almost tearjerker to see that, the sons and daughters are running it, but let me bring in grandma and grandpa to sit on a bench and let me video because we've got to do an orientation that says, here's why we started 47 years ago. Here's what we were trying to accomplish. Here's why you're important. Here's why the guest is important. And so I hope listeners will pick up on that because you're doing those two things. And I think that that's what everyone needs to be doing.
In this digital kind of impersonal world that we have created for ourselves, restaurants are one of the last bastions of human interaction, contact, actual. You get to talk. When you hear our phone message, we say, if you want hours, press 1. If you want to talk to a real live person, press 2. And we've done that for years because when I call, especially a restaurant, but any business, do I want to talk to a real live person? Of course I do. I want to talk to someone who can answer my questions and who can be there. And again, it's certainly more challenging. I grew up in a world of, if the boss is telling you to do it, you do it. And it doesn't really work that way anymore. But if you communicate to the employee right up front, hey, if you act, and I challenge people, I in particular, I will challenge that 16-year-old busser or 17-year-old host, say, hey, I know you're a high school kid, but when you walk inside this building, our expectation of you is to be a hospitality professional. Now, you may only be a hospitality professional 3 hours, 4 days a week, but when you're in this building, you're committed. And part of our core values is talking about intentional excellence, which means when we say guest experiences are a culmination of excellent experiences. It's not just that the food was great, it's that the parking lot was clean and the lighting was right. And when you walk through the door, the host was friendly and the bartender was great drink. And, it's all those things on top of each other that makes an excellent experience. Not just the food was delicious. That's given. The food has to be delicious and beautifully presented. But, that idea of intentional excellence is really important, and your accountability to that. So 2 of our core values are accountability and intentional excellence. Accountability, and I'm very specific in saying it to people in this orientation and in general. Yes, I'm the guy who signed your paycheck. I hope you have a certain level of accountability to me, but I am much more concerned about you being accountable to the people you work with every day. The person who is the server next to you in the station next to you, the cook on the line with you. You owe it to them to do your best. And if you're doing your best and they're doing your best, there's no option but success. And, but you have to have that accountability. And to get a 16-year-old who's just like, man, I just trying to make money so I can buy a new skateboard,
right.
You got to get them to buy into that. And
that's a great principle to share.
Yeah.
A great thing for them to learn that, early, because that is a good principle. You've reminded me of a comment that I remember when being told when I was that age. I think I was 15 in my first job bussing tables, and I had a general manager who basically gave me the definition of guest experience that you're saying. I mean, I just, I didn't know why it was so important then, but he did say that, listen, the reason we try so hard and work together and do all this is because when these guests leave, they have to leave not just happy, they've got to leave ecstatic so that they'll remember. And he said, long after they forget exactly what they ordered, or long after they forget exactly what they paid, they're going to remember how they were treated.
Absolutely.
So when they drive by the building 2 weeks later, if they go, hey, we got to go back, we had such a good time, then we won. So that's the whole experience. And I'm so happy here we are so many years later hearing it and having it be delivered.
There's always developments.
Part-timer's good.
Yeah, there's always developments. There's always changes in our industry. But, at the end of the day, it's hospitality. It's taking care of people, making them, I talk about a difference between service and hospitality because people will, talk about them basically in the same terms. I disagree. I think service is refer to it as the blocking and tackling.
Okay.
To know what your responsibilities are, you need to understand the systems, you need to know the menu, you need to be able to understand how you properly order food, the timing, all those things. You need to know if you're cooking, you need to know, the ingredients that go into the dish and how it's properly prepared. That's service. Hospitality is how we make people feel while we're providing that service. And if we can make people feel a certain way, feel appreciated, recognized, I mean, sometimes that's all there is just they like, oh, even if you don't remember their name, ideally you do, but even if you don't remember their name, hey, just be able to say, it's great to have you back. Is this the 3rd Friday in a row I've seen you? Man, we appreciate that so much. Come on in, let's get you set up. That recognition is gold. And, it's so much more important than did I get every last detail of the experience right. Yes, we need to do things properly. We need to be professionals.
Sure.
But if we're professionals who are making people feel good, then that's the secret sauce. So
Wonderful principles we've been discussing today. I've enjoyed this every minute. I wish we could continue, but I think on that hospitality note, we're going to have to wrap up. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed this time at the Corner Booth. Hope you got some great notes. Dan, thank you so much. This has been Dan Sidner, Black Shoe Hospitality. Listen, look up Maxie's if you don't happen to be lucky enough to be there in Milwaukee, or Story Hill, or Blue's Eggs. That's where I'd like to be, especially now that it's all the bakery. So we've got 3 cool concepts. Dan, sounds like things are going well. Continued success to you. Thanks again for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Everybody, I hope you have a great shift. Go make it a good day, and we'll cross our paths again soon on another Corner Booth.
Thank you for joining us on the Corner Booth. We'll be back next Tuesday with more inspiration, insights, and industry best practices to help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.